Welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I am Charlie Paparelli, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite productivity tools. It's Mem.ai, MEM.ai for artificial intelligence. To be sure not to miss one of these episodes, please subscribe at paparelli.com. Simply submit your email and you'll be notified. You'll also receive as a bonus my Tuesday morning blog that I sent out specifically for entrepreneurs. I am Charlie Paparelli, and I'm an angel investor for 30 years, and I've been helping entrepreneurs achieve their dream of starting and building their companies. Today, my guest is Dennis Xu. Dennis is the co-founder of Mem.ai in Silicon Valley. He is a graduate of Stanford. After a couple of early startups and stopovers at Salesforce and Yelp, he has a hit on his hands, a hot startup, and it's called Mem.ai. I first learned about this through one of my VC newsletters that I receive, and I saw that he had raised $5.6 million from Andreeson Horowitz. So here's this no revenue startup. So this is seed round stuff, and Andreeson is in that deal. Andreessen also did a deal here in Atlanta, but they put in $260 million, so quite a bit difference in stage of company. But when I saw that, I am a rabid note taker and have been all my life, and I have gone from notebooks that I've had all over to also digital notes, and you name the application and I've been in it. I probably have stacks of data in all of these different applications, but Mem caught my attention. And it caught my attention because I didn't have to think hierarchically with Mem. I didn't have to figure out where to store stuff or connect stuff. With Mem, it's not even a note. It's a mem. It's just jotting an idea. And it's so quick and so easy to share. And I've really enjoyed it. I guess I've become one of their more active users over time. My biggest concern was they were going to get their next round, which they did. So welcome, Dennis. I'm glad that you're with us today.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you for the kind introduction. It's great to be on here.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit. Tell us what is Mem.
Yeah.
And I'm going to dig down a little bit too when we get there too, because you might be using some terminology that we're all not very familiar with. We're not soaking in it like you are. So go ahead.
Yeah. No worries. I'll keep it simple, but honestly, I don't know if I can do a much better job than you just did. I think you did. You did a fantastic summary right there. But basically, the premise of Mem is we live in a day and age where we're processing, capturing, and coming across so much information on a day-to-day basis, right? So that's in our work for students. It's in school. For any really knowledge worker, and there's more than 1 billion knowledge workers in the world. We essentially have to process so much information on a day-to-day basis, right? And so much of our work nowadays actually isn't even doing things with that information. It's simply just organizing it. It's putting it into the right folder. It's putting it into the right places, sharing it with the right people. And the reality is no one ever gets it right. And the cost to actually maintain these knowledge management systems, whether as an individual or across an entire team, is just way too high. And so as a result, people just, don't do it. People, essentially try to keep everything in their heads, or they have these very broken systems, these, hierarchical structures that don't really serve them, long into the future. So
why did the hierarchical structure fail? Why did you think?
Yeah. So I think there's actually a very simple explanation here, right? And it's just think about how your brain works, right? So how our brains work is when you process a piece of information, right? Let's say you see a dog for the very first time. You're not thinking, oh, that's a dog and that's a golden retriever, right? You've never seen a dog before. You're just saying that's something. That's something that is alive, right? And it's moving and whatever. Now, the second time you see a dog, right, maybe the same thing, right, you might go, oh, okay, now in my mind, I have this understanding kind of these two things were very similar. Maybe they're both dogs. And that's when you develop the understanding of a dog, right? So whereas the hierarchical systems that we have today, they essentially say, okay, well, I just saw this thing. I have no clue what it is, but it's forcing me to categorize it up front and say this is a dog. But that's just not how our brains work, right? Our brains are very malleable. We form connections, we connect the dots basically looking backwards rather than looking forwards. And that's why these systems don't work, right? And so, that's one of the reasons why these systems don't work. And then, going into a few more, if you work in a team context, right, usually there's one person who sets up, this hierarchical folder structure, right? Someone, it's like their own brainchild where they
it's the
go.
Way they think, right?
It's the way they think, right? They create that scaffolding. They're really proud of it. They share it with everyone, and everyone's had this experience before where people just go, what the hell is this? I have no clue. Right? Where do I find anything?
Yeah. Where do I put this now?
Yeah. So exactly. Right. And so, it's hard enough as an individual, especially if you're, coming across this information after a long time, but in a team context, it's basically impossible. And, a lot of that is just because people's brains work in different ways and, all of that. Right. So these hierarchical rigid structures where, one thing has to go in one place, it can't belong in two places at the same time, is just actually very unintuitive in terms of how our brains actually work. And is, it's the result of these systems
but it seems that's the way the world is, though, right, Dennis? I mean, when you go to Stanford, you open up a textbook, it has a table of contents. And within the table of contents, there's, it goes to a chapter. Within the chapter, there's subheadings in the chapter, right? I mean, we're schooled in this from the beginning of time, our time. Okay. Yet you say it doesn't work.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's actually a great example, because if you think about, how we built our software over the course of, the last, 30, 40 years, it's really been kind of skeuomorphic representations of the physical world, right? So how did folders in software come to be? They were borrowed from filing cabinet, right, that we use in the physical world. Because, right, in the physical world back in the day when there were no computers, right, you had to actually, things could only exist in one place at a time, right? You couldn't have something that lived in this filing cabinet and also this filing cabinet. But today, right, with computers, the cost of moving information is effectively zero. And that's, you could argue, is the fundamental innovation of software, right? So it doesn't cost anything to have one thing in the same place. So one thing in multiple places and all of that. So I think one of the things that as we transition from, the physical world into the digital environment, we took with us this thing that was very familiar, right? Which is basically the filing cabinet. And because it was so familiar and because it was what the first computers were kind of built on, this is really why, people, it's kind of become the de facto, right? But the theoretical promise of software really is a world where we actually don't have and don't need folders, right? Because, that's what this technology actually enables. And I think it's, the world has taken a long time to ultimately get there. And I think a lot of that is just because, in order to really induce behavioral change, you actually need to build a technology that is 10 times more powerful, right? That is 10 times better.
Yeah, but do you put yourself in a situation where you have to change the way people think and change their behavior? Because it's sort of, we have these inbuilt belief systems on this is how something works. I'll give you an example. It's funny that as you're speaking, it reminds me of when we talk about file cabinets back in the mid 90s, late 90s, when the internet started. I invested in a company called The Paper Tiger. And this guy had an idea. He said, you get a piece of paper and you have to file it. And you have to think, okay, do I already have a file that this should go in? Or should I create a new file? And what name I then put on that file? And the software was a very simple thing. What he basically said is, you just put files in your file drawers and you just say, I have file drawer A, B, C. You could say physically, like I have my left drawer, my right drawer. And you just have 1 to 30 in files that are just sitting there. And you go in and you just say, oh, this is my driver's license. So I put in driver's license, I put government document, I put all these descriptions on it, and it says put it in number 1 in your right drawer.
Yeah.
That's it. So now I just search in the paper tiger and it says go to number 1. Go to number 8 in your left drawer. Go to number. So it was a simpler way to file without having to make those decisions like you talked about.
So basically, it was a piece of software that would just tell you where to put it, right?
Tell you where to put it, but it wouldn't.
Gotcha.
But it was all just a numbering system. It was irrelevant. So you didn't have to think through this hierarchy of names. The way I think versus the way you think.
Yeah.
I didn't have to say, well, I put things under licenses, and you say, no, I put it in my folder. I put it under government documents. Okay.
Or personal ID, whatever, or, whatever, right?
Yeah. So I've been investing in this for a while, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's first of all that's really interesting.
But we couldn't beat it.
That
company had a really hard time, and the reason was that's not how I file. That was the answer we got from the marketplace.
Yeah. So I think, and I mean, if you look at kind of the last, 20, 30 years, that's really how the world has developed. And it's why, I think even though what I'm saying right now logically has made sense for the last 20 to 30 years, why the behavior actually has not changed, right? In these corporations and the tools that we use and all of that. And I think, of course, like with every startup, I think one of the most important questions to really answer is why now, right? What is it? Every idea has been tried hundreds of times.
Yeah,
right?
But let's go back. So why now is right. Yeah. And in such a busy space.
Yeah.
You cannot be in a busier space. Yeah. All right. It's crazy what you've stepped into here as a developer and as a founder. So how did this sort of idea come to the fore? I mean, where did it come from? Was it something that you were struggling with personally, or was it just a bolt of lightning? Where did it come from? Tell me about the genesis of this thing and how you developed it.
Yeah. And I'll also weave in some of the, why now into this.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But basically, it was absolutely just a problem that both, Kevin, my co-founder, and I faced.
By the way, as a side note, how'd you meet Kevin?
So Kevin and I...
Because finding a co-founder is really hard.
Yeah.
Because it's getting married. You guys are together forever here now, okay?
He's actually getting married this year. But, I actually was there when he met his now fiance. So
he married you first.
He absolutely did. I mean, Kevin and I, that story goes back literally 9 years. It was we were both freshmen starting at Stanford, and we drew into the same freshman dorm. We didn't know each other at all, but. Freshman year, everyone is, really friendly, trying to get to know each other and all of that stuff. So Kevin and I got to, basically know him within the first week of school. We actually didn't start off on a great foot. He apparently he didn't really like me for some reason. But became really, really good friends. And Kevin, he was basically, in the lounge one day of our dorm, and he was showing a bunch of people kind of this product that he'd built in high school. And I was like, I was just kind of like shocked. I was like, wow, people can actually build, people like me, my age, could actually build software, and it would work, and other people would use them. Because obviously, at that point in time, I was like, I was using Facebook, like Instagram, and those things, but it didn't seem real to me that real people actually built them. I just really never thought.
Why is that?
So
why was that? Is it some way the way that you were raised, or the people that you surrounded yourself with?
Well, I think it's just that I never really when I was growing up, I didn't know anyone who built software, right? As a kid. So I grew up in this small town in Canada, and played a lot of sports, and everyone played a lot of sports, and all of that stuff. But
Yeah.
I did
So
like math competitions, all of that.
you were a Chinese hockey player. Did you play hockey?
No, I played basketball.
Oh, okay. Are you tall?
Yeah. I grew really tall, and then I stopped growing. So I'm 6'2".
Oh,
But
yeah,
I
you
was
are
like,
tall. Okay.
I was like 5'9" in seventh grade or so.
Wow.
But then stopped growing, and so that was a pretty painful transition.
There goes the NBA, huh?
Yeah, that was actually my first dream. Was to play in the NBA. But going back to Kevin,
But that would be
I
a
saw
reason,
that.
though, if you're hanging around. I mean, Kevin was probably hanging around a lot of guys. It's sort of the Bill Gates story, right? He hung around in the one computer lab that they had
So
in the back
interestingly
room.
enough, he also grew up in Florida,
Uh-huh.
had zero kind of tech presence that was around him.
Wow.
And what happened for him is he was, he got sick from school one day in ninth grade. And he got really sick, so he was home for the entire week. And so he went on YouTube and started watching videos. And he stumbled across like a coding video. And he started watching that and started teaching himself how to code from there. And then he started building a bunch of, things for random interests that he had. So I think that's actually a lot of how, the story begins for a lot of people. But you're totally right. I feel like, a lot of the time you grow up in that environment, right? Like anyone who grows up in the Bay Area.
It's very unusual, man. For you to say what you said, I had never heard that before. Were you a computer science major?
I was. So I ended up studying computer science, honestly, in large part because of, just how impressed I was with what, Kevin was able to build, and also some of my peers around me. And I said, I want to be able to do that. And so I decided to study computer science.
You started hanging around with developers. When you saw that, I think that's so cool that I think that we move in a direction just naturally that we get attracted to. Because we don't know, like you said, I'm not going to be an NBA player. I'm not tall enough to be a Division I college basketball player. Right? So here I am. Yeah. What do I do now? I'm at a great school. What now? And then you go like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And then you just light up with it. And there you go.
I think that's just generally how I've approached my life. I think I usually get really excited about certain things and inspired, so to speak, about like what's possible. I think there's so much that is possible in the world, and so much that we can actually.
Were you somebody
change.
that had difficulty, that you were interested in, you were drawn to so many things, that you were interested in so many things that you had difficulty choosing, which you will participate in?
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly enough, no. I think I was able to. I was definitely always like very curious. I consider myself, a curious person, and I think I tend to see the upside, so to speak, in most things. But I've never had, trouble committing to anything, and I haven't really thought about why, honestly. Which is, this sparked an interesting question in my head that I'm going to mull over for the next few days now. But yeah, I've never really had trouble committing to things, and I think part of that is just.
And the question you're going to mull over is why you haven't had trouble committing?
Why is it that despite being interested in so many different things and curious about so many different things, that I haven't had trouble committing to anything in particular? Because you would think, or at least this sounded like where your question was headed is, for someone who typically people who have a lot of interests, get pulled in a lot of different directions and have trouble committing to a certain thing.
Well, and I think it's particularly true with people that are academically gifted. Okay, people that are highly intelligent, because they could be. What do you want to be? A doctor, a lawyer? Do you want to be an engineer? Do you want to be, a computer scientist? Anything? The world's your oyster, right? So I'm interested in all those things, but I never go anywhere because I never commit to one.
Yeah. I mean, so for me,
with people that don't have that level of gifting, it's like, just find me something I could do well, okay? And they get in it and they do well,
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it was the thing that was always very compelling because, a lot of the professions you listed, also, having Asian parents, those are all things I think I considered, right?
Oh,
Lawyer,
yeah.
doctor, all of those things, of course. But there was just something that was appealing. And, I guess this is why I'm going down this path now, about creating something. And that is totally new, if that makes sense. And,
So how did
that's a
this come
lot of what
about?
I'm
How did
drawn
that
by.
idea come about? So you knew Kevin, you met Kevin, you said he's your
Yep.
co-founder, but you met him in freshman year when you first got to Stanford.
Yeah.
Then you went off in your separate ways,
Yep.
right? He did his thing, you did
Well,
yours.
uh,
How did you come back together to come around, coalesce around this idea, if you will?
yeah. I mean, honestly, we didn't really go our separate ways. So I think, that's
Okay.
part of it, which is over the years, we've spent the last 6 years, so 6 out of the last 9 years actually living in the same place, like literally the same house. And, now I'm in San
Okay.
Francisco. He's down in Los Altos. So that's like a 40-minute drive. And this is like the farthest we've been in years. And we built, countless little things together, right? They weren't all companies. None of them were just like fun little applications. So in our dorm room, we built something to track, scores and rankings between people who were playing ping pong and foosball and pool, because we were very competitive about that. And we wanted to know who was the best. And we just did so many different things together in our freshman summer. So the first year we knew each other, we both had internships in San Francisco,
Right.
and so we lived in this literal, I'm not exaggerating, 8 foot by 10 feet apartment. Like that was the entire 2 people living in that. We had a bunk bed that was shaped like a clamshell. So it didn't look structurally sound. And when one person got, on top of on the top bunk, and it was Kevin because he's smaller, the clam would like collapse a little bit. And so, the person on the bottom would be like really worried. Right. So, and that was me, obviously. But I mean, just to kind of paint the picture of how like we've just been best friends for so long and have, just tinkered and built countless things. One example is this app called Go to Class that we never launched, but the premise was we would never go to class because we didn't go to class for some reason. And we realized we were paying so much in tuition, right? And, Stanford tuition is no joke. And, for all that tuition, we weren't actually making it to class. So we said, okay, well, what if we punished ourselves? If, every time we didn't go to class, we would have to pay into the system. And every time, we did go to class, the system would pay back out into us. And we have all of these little random ideas over the years.
All of that just instead of just saying, come on, Kevin, man, we need to go to class.
Yeah, because that didn't work. We thought money would do it. But that didn't work either. I think it has to be some
So let's
intrinsic
move along,
motivation.
though. Get to the idea. Okay, let's get
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
Mem
yeah.
idea.
So actually, in that summer when we were in San Francisco, one recurring conversation that we would have over
How
and
long
over
ago is
again.
this now? Just date this for me.
This is 2014.
14.
We would
Okay.
have this recurring conversation all the time about why it was the case that despite our digital footprints, so the things that specifically, like I held up my phone and I said, if I gave someone my phone right now and I opened it for them and I said, you can look at anything you want, just help me find the information I need, they would actually be able to do it. And they would actually be able to essentially reconstruct my life in its entirety and help me understand, and connect all of these dots like a person would be able to do that. And then the prompt was, if a person could theoretically do this, why can software not do this? Right. And what that kind of, started us going in this direction of, what if there was this me API, right? I don't know if you've read some of our blog posts, but essentially the concept of, this universal API where you could just essentially ask any question about yourself and receive the correct answer. And that, and then you could have
Because
other
this
apps that
API
would build
allowed
on
you
top of
to
that.
get into to connect to any database anywhere, kind of a deal. Right.
Exactly, right. It would be connected to all of your data sources. It could answer any question about you, and then other developers could build on top of that. And that really, I think if you think about the fundamental premise of productivity and knowledge software, that's really the world that we're headed towards, right?
Right.
So that came up repeatedly. It came up the first time, I would say, in 2014. We had many conversations about that then. And then it just kept coming up throughout our relationship, just building random things together, talking as friends. And then we did go our separate ways after college. So I went to Yelp as a PM. He went to Google. But one thing that we did is every Wednesday we would jump on this call. It was called Dream Team. And we would just talk for, an hour to 2 hours about life. And then it would always come back to, okay, what is the company that we're starting and when are we starting it? And after literally, this took like a year. We explored many spaces, talked about various things. We realized that the one thing that we just kept coming back to was, this core concept of how do we actually just make the information that we know, right, or that a team knows, always useful? How do we maximize the utility of that information? And then we said, when I was at Yelp, I'd experienced
But I
this.
like that concept. So the idea here is, again, which forces you out of this hierarchical thinking. You just say, there's this, all of my knowledge, all of your knowledge, and all of Kevin's knowledge, right? I can just come in and do a search, and I can just get what I need. I get the best of your thinking in this particular subject or area.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And basically, think of it this way. Imagine if you had a black box, right, that you could just throw things into. And all you did was whenever you came across a piece of information or knowledge or anything where you said, hey, this I want to remember and I want to be able to retrieve it later, and I want this to appear at the right time. You just throw it into that black box, and that's the only decision you made. Nothing else. You don't say, oh, please label this XYZ or whatever.
But
please
it's interesting
put this
with
in this
that.
folder.
When you throw it into the black box, then it really gets to, and I've had this experience with Mem, okay, and with other note-taking apps, okay, will I ever find this again?
Find it again. Totally. Exactly.
So it really gets down to search, right?
Well, actually,
and that's what it is. So that's what I like about Mem is I could just write something quick, just a sentence or a couple of thoughts or a quick URL. And I don't have to think about, put it here, put it there. I just have it out there. It's in the black box. Okay, there it is.
I would take that a step further, and I would say it's not even just all about search. That's kind of the first step. I would say it's actually even more so about discovery. And what I mean by that is you obviously want to be able to find the thing when you explicitly search for it, right? But a lot of the time, the most important time for a piece of information to show up is not when you explicitly search for it. It's when you're actually doing something that needs that piece of information, right? And you might not actually remember to search for it, right? And that's essentially the problem that we're solving, which is at its core, at its core, that is a search problem. It's just knowing essentially when to search on your behalf, right?
I like that. And I have experienced this. I've experienced this with Mem. Okay, as I have with others, I say, I have guest instructions that I sent you, for example, for this, right? And I forgot that I had guest instructions. I was typing in interviewee instructions or something, right? And of course, it wasn't finding anything, because I didn't have the exact right words that it could do a match. And and so when you announced Mem.ai, okay, this idea of discovery now is to say, oh, he's saying interviewee, he might also mean guest, or he might, there's these connections, right? And then all of a sudden it shows up, and I go
because if you told a person, right, hey, give me the interviewee instructions. The person would be able to connect the dots and say, oh, maybe you want guest instructions.
Right,
That might be what it is. Right? But our computers, or at least the software that we use today, can't do that, right? And that's fundamentally what we're enabling. What if we could actually have the software that you use that manages your information?
So when did you get to the point? So you guys are on this, what'd you call it, a discovery call? The hour-long call?
No, we called it Dream Team.
Dream Team. I love that.
It was just us talking.
No, the Dream Team gets together once a week for an hour or two, and just talks, right? Just ideas, life in general, what's going on. But with this underlying desire to start something, we want to build something meaningful, right?
Right.
So when
well, because we've done it so many times before, and we enjoyed working together, obviously.
Yeah, it's cool.
And we,
So now, but what you get to the point is you say is, how do you get to the point? I'm at Google, you're at Yelp.
Yeah.
And we say, look, man, who's going to quit their job first?
Yeah.
Because you guys are making good money, really good money. And it's expensive to live out there. So that big question comes up. How far along was the idea before you're willing to make that level of commitment, as opposed to just being dream teamy guys on a call and coding, at 1 a.m, and then reconnecting after that? You follow me? Like a lot of people do.
So you're gonna believe this, and maybe we're crazy, but basically the hardest thing for us was to agree on a thing that we could both see ourselves working on for the rest of our lives. And that was like the most important
is a
criteria.
Big thought and critical for all entrepreneurs to get to. You can't test things. You got to say, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this. I'm going to dedicate my life to it.
We're gonna make it work, because I strongly believe that if you're in the mindset of, let's test this and see if it works, right? It's not going to work. It's never going to work the first time.
You must have heard that concept of burn the ships, right?
Yeah, burn the ships or burn the bridge, right? Or exactly.
Yeah, but I always talk about when the Pilgrims came over, they burned the ships, and they said,
there's no return.
This is going to work.
Yeah, it has to.
I don't know if we're going to get along with anybody. I don't know if the thing I'm looking at is a dog or not, right? I don't know what's going on. But
if it doesn't work, we're not coming back.
Yeah, right. And that's the point that you're making here, is to finally to get to step in and do that. And it's interesting that entrepreneurs are in that stage where they haven't burned the ships are asking people like me for money. And I'm really looking for somebody who burned the ships.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going to work and not work when you get started.
Yeah, I mean, so when we got started, we actually started the company and raised our first. And this is before the Andreeson Horowitz round.
This is before you had code.
Before we had a single line of code.
We're talking PowerPoints.
Yes, we had a PowerPoint presentation, and actually, the reason. There's a lot of reasons, but basically, I had to transfer my visa. There was a lot of, random stuff. And Google is known as a stickler when it comes to IP. And so if you write any code for a different thing while you're working for Google, they have a claim on it and all of that. So we were just very careful about all of that. And we actually wrote our first line of code after we had both started at Mem full time.
I didn't realize what you just said, and that's very important. So in your employment agreements with these companies in the Valley, they're saying anything you write at any time while in our employ, whether you're on the job or off the job, on our time or on your time, it's ours.
It doesn't typically work that way. And, in California, these things are notoriously unenforceable, and companies don't really enforce them. Except the one exception is Google, and they're known to sue.
So they'll go after you, even if it's unenforceable. All they got to do is create a problem. They got more money than you do for lawyers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we wanted to make sure that there were no issues there, because obviously Google's competitive in many ways with.
So who did you go to get that first money, so that you didn't run through all your money real fast?
Yeah. So we tapped into basically a lot of the people that we had met in school, who had interned at various places, who are working at various VC firms, or who knew certain investors, and we just lined up a bunch of meetings through a combination of warm intros and cold emails, and so there was about 2 week long process where Kevin and I, this was actually when we were still technically at our other jobs, where we would just be meeting with one or two people every day, and so we'd be just in conversations with various investors, and then we ended up actually getting a few term sheets. One of them was from our lead pre-seed investor, Andreeson at Floodgate, legendary investor in the Valley. They're one of the first investors in Lyft, Twitch, Twitter, all of these companies. And so that was really just the first round that got us off the ground.
What kind of terms were they on?
Yeah, I mean, it was without disclosing kind of too many details, it was basically just a few $100,000 to get started, right?
With what was the pre-money on the few $100,000?
It was I think it was around like $1 million back in
$1 million.
$5
million.
Yep.
$5 million pre on just a PowerPoint slide.
Yeah.
And some pretty good resumes. And some guys that look like they're sold out. So that's $5 million. So yeah, okay. So if he put in a few $100,000, he was getting 10% of the company or whatever it was at that point.
Something like that.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Okay. Well, people are interested, entrepreneurs interested in saying, how does it work? Right. You got to be really careful when you get started that if you're, everybody wants a low valuation as an angel investor. But the issue with that is how much money is it going to take to actually get this company to cash flow positive?
And also how much
if you
of
take
the company
too much of a bite
up
front, you're screwed.
Exactly.
Because then you wind up working for options, 5 years from now, and that's not the place to go as a founder. So that's interesting. So you found him and he did. How many people did you talk to as you're giving these 2-a-day kind of presentations that said, what the hell are you talking about? I don't get it.
Yeah. We talked to about 15 to 20 people, if I remember correctly. I mean, this was 3 years ago, so honestly, that's like three decades in startup time. But I think we talked to about 15 to 20 people. I think luckily our second conversation actually was when we got our first term sheet, and so that was once you get the first one, the rest are much easiher.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're credible, right?
Yeah. So honestly, I think we had it. I would say we had it relatively a relatively straightforward time fundraising. Fortunately, at least in our first round. So
that is really nice. I mean, you're in a place where people are swimming in money. It seems there. After having been in all these unicorns, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So the ecosystem.
So then you started developing this thing, and what the vision that you had, which is this sort of put it all. I love it. It's so clear now. Is to say, put your ideas or your thoughts or whatever you want to find, just throw it in this black box, and don't worry. We're going to discover it, and we're not going to just search for it. We're going to discover all of the connections and everything else. Things that you had forgotten about are all going to show up just when you need them. Right?
Exactly. How do you?
Well, that is something that you can't build in version 1.0.
No.
It's sort of, I don't know what version that is to where it really is perfected, right? I don't know that you know what version that is at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think that was one of the important criteria that we used when we were deciding what to work on, which is we wanted to work on an evergreen problem, right? So I think there are, there's kind of two types of companies that are built. There's one type of company that capitalizes on, whatever is hot in that moment, right? There's, it's the companies who would have built, remote work tools in the beginning of the pandemic, right? Because they said, oh, this is hot, or, nowadays
they saw an obvious problem. They did. They saw a problem.
Exactly.
And you're sitting here, and it's subtle what your problem that you're solving. It's very subtle.
It's subtle, but I think it is evergreen in the sense that it will never fully be solved.
Well, note-taking is evergreen.
Sure. Yeah.
It is. It's evergreen.
Yeah.
We know we're going to have it now forever. I mean, I had it back in the in the late 70s in my first startup, right? I had
Yeah.
notebooks. I mean, I was taking notes. I mean,
Yeah.
now we just went to digital, and then we went to where you can actually write on your iPad and take notes that way and do all that nonsense. But it was all the same stuff.
Or maybe one day, we don't take notes anymore, and we just essentially
That's too big a thought.
everything in our brain that we process just gets captured in a way that we can actually just search. So that I think there's been have you seen like Neuralink? There's been some interesting developments where there's like monkeys who can actually play video games just using their brain without using anything, right? So they'll plug the monkey into like this helmet, and they use electronic signals to actually figure out what's going on inside the brain, and it's doing the thing, right? And there's also people with disabilities who can't move, or
I've seen that research. I have seen that research. Yeah.
So I think that's
what your vision is, or is that something that's a possibility, but that's not part of your product vision or where you're headed with this company?
I mean, for us, I think however we allow you to capture this information, and we just think of these as other ways to actually capture information, that doesn't really matter to us, and we're kind of agnostic to that, right? What we do is we essentially process the information that you do capture, right?
When you did go ahead.
What I was going to say is I could totally envision, and I would welcome a world that'd be incredible, right? Where you don't even have to remember to write it down, because honestly, writing something down is half the battle, right? It's very painful to actually be very diligent about remembering to write the right things down all the time. So I think we'll eventually get to that world.
I do that when I am. I'll be listening. I'll be on a walk here in Atlanta, and I'll listen to a podcast, and I have to stop the podcast, and I have to open Mem, and I have to write down my idea that I got from the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Because I know in 200 yards, I will have lost that idea because it would have been pushed out by a new idea, right?
Exactly. And we're already seeing this happen with meetings recordings. I've been seeing more and more of hopping into meetings where there's some AI note taker, right? That's just essentially recording and transcribing everything.
But so let's get this. So you've got this vision for this product that really, for it all to work the way we were just talking about, the black box and the discovery mode and search, is out there, right? So how do you, when you have this sort of out there vision that you sold the first guy on, the first investor, first you sold each other on it, then you sold an investor on it, okay? And here you are saying, so then the question comes with the that first few $100,000, like what are we trying to achieve with the first few $100,000? What's that milestone? How do you get started?
Yeah.
You can't keep waving you can't keep blue skying it like this.
Totally.
It's not building anything. So you got to start with something that's pretty boring.
Yeah. Which is, why we started with notes.
Okay, I mean, there you go.
Honestly, I think we said the first problem we're going to solve is, and this is a problem that we had both experienced. And so this might come as a surprise to you, but at Yelp, I never took notes. I literally never took a single note. And the reason I never took a single note is because every time I had tried to do so in the past, the information that I would capture would end up being completely useless to me, because I would have something, and then 2 months later I would realize, I need that piece of information back, and I would just have no way how to find it. I'd have no,
So it was accessibility. That was the killer there. So why am I taking notes if I can never find where the heck to note it?
Exactly. Like what's the point? Why am I taking the effort to do this if it's totally useless?
I solved that problem, which is interesting to me. Is I'm visual, okay, I realized. And I would remember where in the notebook it was. Like how far in, and what page. Was it the page left facing or right facing? And was the information in the top right corner or not? I would remember that. It was bizarre.
Yeah, I wasn't nearly as good of a student as you were. And, for me, I was, and still to this day, am so horribly disorganized, right? Which I think has actually really helped, in building this product, because if it can work for me, it can work for anyone, right? And
I like that. So
I
the
think
real
that,
reason that
yeah.
the real problem that you were solving when you started this company was your problem.
So I had this flavor of problem, and Kevin also had this flavor of problem at Google, right?
Okay.
Where he had tried everything under the sun. He would try capturing things in email drafts. He would try doing it in, Google Docs. He would try in Apple Notes. All of these different things, and he took more notes than I did, because I think he was slightly more organized, but really not that much more organized than me. But he experienced the exact same problem, and so that was really the first very tangible problem that we said, hey, we're going to go solve this, which is the things that we write down today become completely useless. And how do we make sure that the things that
So
we
how do you
write down
start then? So
actively?
let's go back to how do you start?
Yeah.
We've
So
kind of
how we
trudged through
start?
the mud on this problem thing for a while now. We get that, okay?
Yeah.
So now, but where do I start? Okay, I go for my PowerPoint slides, which paint the sky. Okay, and now I got to get to the rubber meets the road. I got to
Yeah.
code something.
Yeah.
Who designed it?
So Kevin was the main designer, plus developer in the early days. So
Okay.
yeah.
And what the first milestone was is just create another note app.
That was so it was create one of those, right? one of those, except without having any folders. And the first problem was, how do we make it so that people don't have to think about where do I put this before I start writing? So it was just a blank notepad. They would start writing, and in the process of writing, they could add a tag, and that was it. And that was the first version of the product, and I think we got that out. Once we decided we were going to do that, which was pretty early on, that took about a week, and we had this terribly looking
User
product.
interface.
And then we were using it ourselves. We had a few friends using it. We gave it to a few investors as well, so it was like a handful of people, and that's how we started. This was back in, I think the first version was released in October of 2019. Yeah.
When did you start getting some traction where people like me started showing up? I'm trying to think when I first started using Mem.
When did you start using Mem?
I can't. It might have been. Well, we're into 22 now. I'm wondering if it was the beginning of 21, maybe, or late 20.
So
I thought I read that there was an announcement that Andreeson put money in at. There was a $5 million round that was closed.
Yeah. So that was the second. That was basically the second round. So that.
Because I remember talking to, what was that? What's her name? Alexa or not Alexa? Is it Alex?
Alex.
Yeah, I remember when she would get on and she would help us. She would have these calls where you could kind of have like 5 people from around the world, and we'd be using the product, and she would answer some questions for us. She was a delightful. And I remember before she got off that first call, I said, "Look, man, I'm putting a lot of stuff into this. I need to know that you guys are going to be alive.
Yeah.
Are you going to have funding here or what?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, I don't really know, but Kevin and Dennis, they're saying it's going well."
Yeah. So we basically were in this invite only zone, and we were releasing kind of a new version of the product. In the early days, I mean, now we still release updates every 2 weeks. And
back then, you were releasing every Friday, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we were releasing probably every other day, and the product would change so dramatically. And actually, one of the things that we said is that we would keep the user base really small initially on purpose. And the reason is, when we have now now the reason why we actually can't change the product a crazy amount every single day or every 2 days is because people like you essentially depend on the product, right? And do all the work in there. But back in the day, we would be changing the entire UI every single day. The interface, features we would just
and it's
rip
really
features out.
I have turned a couple of people onto it, and they went elsewhere. And the reason is they run into it doesn't have this feature, or they run into this bug, and there's so many other Note apps that they go, well, I'm not going to do that. I can't trust it. And boom, they're gone.
Yeah.
And how do you get that guy back? It's because he's gone. He tried it. Oh yeah, I tried that thing and I'm out. Right. It's so you got to be careful during that time.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So, and also, it makes it harder to turn the ship, the bulkier the ship is. Right. So we kept it really small. Honestly, I think it was like less than 100 people for basically the first year, all the way until I would say like 2021, end of 2021. It was like less than 100 people on purpose. And then we started actually slowly, as we kind of gained more confidence in kind of, okay, this actually is the correct direction for the first version, of the product, that these are the foundations that we can actually build upon. We started actually bringing more people on board. Right. And the way we did that is initially, actually, I would just get on a call with every single person. Right. So if you signed up back in, late 2020 or early 2021, would have gotten on a call together. And I just would walk you through the product for 30 minutes and answer any questions that you might have. And then we would go from there. And it wasn't really until I think the fundraising announcement, which was last year in April, that was when we really started to kind of open the floodgates and kickstart a lot of the organic growth that's been happening since.
Yeah, I think on my first call, I think you had 1,000 users or something like that. It was still that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was pretty early on, but it was such a unique product, and I haven't seen one yet. And by the way, when I was preparing for this, I ran into a product doing a little bit of research, so I didn't sound like a complete idiot on some of your company background and your background.
Yeah.
I ran into something that I thought was pretty flattering. Okay, and I think it's a UK-based company called Supernotes.
Oh yeah, yep. I've heard of that one.
They have, and what it said, because I was searching for Mem.ai, it comes up, and they actually had a page that came up that said, Mem.ai users are all switching to Supernotes. And I said, wow. I said, here's this company getting out of the ground, and this other company's trying to steal their users that they're just getting out of the ground. I was like, incredible. So flattering for you, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, that,
Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, they go, and they're fishing for your people.
It's interesting because there's something that I tell I tell the team all the time, which is, when everything that is said about you on the internet is positive, that means you haven't made it yet. And that's just
why
the reality.
Is that?
Right. Well, because I think when everything, it's whenever you have something that is succeeding, it feels like there's this universal law, right? This rule of the universe where
you're right.
The
critics show up.
Right. Yeah, the critics show up because they realize they can start to build audiences based on, being a critic of this particular thing that everyone else likes. Right. So I think critics are actually a sign that you're onto something.
That's excellent. That's a great way to measure success. How you doing? We just passed 7:01. How you doing with your time?
Yeah, I can do a few more minutes.
Okay.
No worries.
How much time do you have? Give me a time frame here so I know.
Let's say like 10.
10 minutes. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
So how did you then land this round? What did you have to achieve in order to? Because it sounds like what you were doing is you kept getting angel investors sort of coming in and keeping you alive for a while. Through 19, through 20, you get into 21.
Well,
how did you attract real money like institutional investor like Andreeson?
Yeah, I mean, Honestly, again, I think it was kind of a stroke of luck in many ways. We weren't actually setting out to raise. So by the time we ended up raising money from Andreeson, we had plenty of money left at the bank. I think we still had 30 months of runway. And
Wow.
again, at that point, it was just me and Kevin, just the two of us still in our Los Altos house, building together.
Sounds like you were being very careful, though, too. Even though you had money, you weren't bringing people on, because the most expensive, the quickest way to spend money is to hire people.
And it's like I said, it's much harder to turn the ship when you have more people, right?
It is,
we're turning the ship every single day, right? And so what happened was we actually onboarded to David Yulovich, our lead investor in the last round. We onboarded him as a user onto the product. Because we, like I said, we were doing these 30-minute onboarding sessions with new people so that we could actually get a sense of what their problems were. So we onboarded him as a user, and then, he was very impressed by what we were building. And he basically asked us, how he could actually invest in our next round. And so we weren't actually fundraising. And
he was an Andreeson guy?
Yeah. So he still is, right? So. Yeah.
Was he a partner at Andreeson, or is he one of the? He was a partner.
Yeah.
So, what is his expectation in investing in a note app? I mean, those guys got more money than God. Okay, but
yeah.
So you sit there, and I don't know what they put into it. I don't know. I'm sure it was. You said you closed a $5.6 million round. I'm sure they weren't all of the 5.6. Because as soon as Andreeson shows up, all the angels want to just pile on, okay?
Yeah. I mean, so,
our dream is to hand off the funding to somebody with pockets so deep you can't see the bottom of them, okay? That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were one of the, I think every single one of our investors, right? The story that we believe in, the story that we would tell them is, hey, this is not a notes app. Right, like it may look like a notes app right now, but that's because
it looks like a no what?
It may look like a notes app right now.
Did you say no tap?
Sorry, notes app.
Notes app. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I just wanted to make sure I didn't understand.
Yeah, so it may look like that right now, but that's not where we're headed, right? And the reason it looks like that right now is because you have to start by solving a real problem for someone.
Well, we already went there, so we understand. I get it. Yeah.
Exactly. So. Yeah. So they don't really see it as investing in a notes app is I guess.
What does he see? If I went to him, that partner with Andreeson, what would he tell me? Like you just put in $5 million, whatever number they put in. They put in millions. Okay. What do you think is going to happen with this thing?
Yeah.
What would the guy say?
I think he would tell you, and probably this is a lot of what we told him, but that it has the potential to become the operating system for all of knowledge work, right? The place where all of your knowledge lives, and where it becomes a system of record for all enterprise data. Well, not just enterprise, but personal data as well.
Wow.
Right? And essentially a platform that, and obviously investors like investing in platforms, right? And I, personally, I like building.
When you said that, it reminded me of, I just have grandbabies now, but it reminds me of putting a 3-month-old infant in front of a 16-ounce sirloin. And say, when you grow up, it's really going to be good if it's still good,
Yeah.
Because that's how big what you just said is. Okay.
Yeah.
The operating system for knowledge. Yes. I mean, that's incredible. It's just an incredible thought. So you get this money, and you can only move so fast, right?
Yep.
I mean, we were
moving as fast as two people could.
So one of the things, and I just want to get back into the business here, is you just announced your pricing.
Yep.
Okay. How did you come to that pricing? Because that's always something that, and you went through it, and you know how difficult that is,
Yeah.
So how did you finally come to this pricing of, what was it, $10 a seat? Is that what you're at now?
So it's a combination of things. So one is there's a Mem Free Plan. So that was kind of one of the biggest decisions, right? But we made that pretty early on, which is there's always going to be a version of the product that's free.
Right.
And the reason is, first of all, like that part of the product, it actually doesn't cost us that much to, to
Right.
actually provide that service. And it's a
And
great funnel for,
it's an easy
it's a great
onboard,
funnel.
right? Easy onboard.
Exactly.
Yeah, no
Right.
decision.
So
I got it.
no decision, freemium model, obviously hyper competitive space, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be really hard to get someone to try something that doesn't start off free. But then what we decided is, and we went through kind of many different iterations of this. We were thinking about what should we really charge for? Should we be charging for storage? Should we be charging for templates, calendar, like which integrations or whatever. And then we realized that we were just overcomplicating things, and we just said, hey, what are the two things that differentiate Mem from the rest of the world in terms of what we're building? And those two things are AI and collaboration. So those are the two things that we are going to charge for and nothing else. Everything else we're going to give away for free. And so we said, okay, so that's why we created this Mem.x plan. And this is part of, Mem.x is really building off of this foundational breakthrough technology.
Yeah,
right,
but Mem.x at this
exist.
point really
Yeah.
is what you're charging for the $10 is for the collaboration and
Yep.
for the storage, okay, to upload a certain size attachment, if you will.
And
Right.
for the Mem.x discovery.
But that's
pieces.
so early on. I mean, it's still
right.
It's
So
a lot of learning that has to take place for that to have higher value at this point.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right.
And what interested me is that your pricing though was $10 per. It's $10, I believe, for that.
So it's $10 for individuals, basically, and
Yeah.
then it's $15 per seat for teams, and then we have an enterprise plan. Yeah.
But the other apps that are note-taking apps, the run-of-the-mill, they all seem to be in that sort of $6 to $8 a month kind of range. It was interesting to me that you decided to premium price.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, there's again always a free version, but the way we think about this really is all the other products out there. Let's call them note-taking apps. They're very much focused on essentially workflows, right? On ways to actually make certain things easier, customization, all of those things, right? And the promise of what we're really building towards is this world where you don't have to think about any of that, right? And so for us, that is something that more people would pay more for, and the people who wouldn't pay that $10 fee, that's totally fine. Stay on the free plan. Quite frankly, I think what we want is we want people who are paying customers to be most closely aligned with the direction we want the company to go. And if that direction is doubling down on the investments in artificial intelligence and in collaboration, then we want those people to be paying, and we don't want the other people to be paying, because paying customers are great, but they can also be headaches, right? So
I'm going to continue as a paying customer because I want to see the rest of the story. And now that you got the 5 million in, I feel like you're going to be around, which means I've got 1,000 notes and mems now. I'm going to probably have another 1,000, right? And once I'm in, I'm in. That's my database, my knowledge database. So I'm counting on you. What is it that are you the CEO?
So Kevin and I are actually we're actually both it's co-CEOs.
So you get this co-CEO, okay? Yeah. Well, you went from simplicity to complexity on that one. That's going to be an interesting one. How that all
that was a discussion that we had very early on, because we both realized that we really didn't fit the mold in many ways, and where you typically have a business co-founder and then you have the technology co-founder.
Yeah.
Right. And it just didn't really apply to us. And we had so much overlap across so many different things that for us, it made more sense.
What's interesting to me, though, is when I do searches and look around, you seem to be the face that comes up. Okay. So there's going to be sort of this default piece that sort of sees you as that CEO or the leader of Mem. Okay. But we don't need to go down that road. That's something that you and your investors will sort of have to work through because your role is to build a company. and
Yeah.
that's what's most important at this point. So you're past startup. You have, I don't know, how many users do you have now?
Nowadays we have it's in the tens of thousands.
Great.
Without
Okay.
disclosure.
So you're growing. What is it going to take for you? How much more money is it going to take, do you think,
Yeah.
or to get to this vision that you have, or cash flow break even, whichever comes first? Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I don't think we're going to be cash flow break even or positive, honestly, anytime soon. And I think a lot of that is just because we want to continue investing in the business. So honestly, it's hard to tell, but I think hopefully we can do it with as little capital as possible. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people miss nowadays, which is, they think the goal is to raise a lot of money and to spend a lot of money, but that's not the goal, right? The goal is to build a great enduring business.
Really? That seems to be the goal in Silicon Valley. It's just like everybody just wants to keep taking investments. In other words, I don't really have to get to profitability. I just have to make sure I'm hitting milestones and growing, and people will just continue to fund the deficits,
So, in some cases it makes sense, right? But in others, and I think we're already starting to see the dominoes fall there.
So you don't believe that. You're really trying to create a sustainable business.
We are, but
and be capital efficient.
Definitely being capital efficient, yeah.
Good
but
for you.
Not necessarily gunning for profitability in the short term. Yeah.
Good for you. So how does it? And so I have to ask this question. I know we're pressed. How do you create brand recognition in a market that's just? It seems like there's a new Note app coming out. They're just out there. Because I was talking to people about this, I had people tell me, I found that Super Notes. I had another guy that tried yours, but because there was one bug at one time on some paste that he did, he left. And he's like all over this craft thing, on Apple. And then there's this other guy telling me about, I'm like, whoa, what is this? How's Dennis going to handle this? How do you build that brand recognition?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's this is why we invest a lot in our community. I think at the end of the day, Charlie, it's people like you. It's our users. It's our greatest evangelists, and our job is to build software and a product that you don't know you want, right? But you do, and and then really rely on our users to evangelize.
Oh, it's word of mouth.
I think we've been very fortunate.
So we're all of the users on the marketing team. Is that it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So what is it? Last question is, so what is it? So as co-CEOs, while you and Kevin get together, it's Kevin, right? Your partner?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Your co-founders, Kevin. When you have your dream team meetings, okay, what is the biggest concern that you guys have as you look forward here at this stage in the development of Mem.ai? What keeps you up? What has you like grinding, saying, I hadn't figured that one out yet?
Our biggest concern. That's an interesting one. Honestly, I think for us, it's just making sure that we're building the right thing for and solving the right problems for our users. And as our team continues to grow, as our user base continues to grow, I think it's it's easy to be pulled in directions that are kind of the wrong direction. And at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is, does it solve a problem? Does it solve an important problem for our users, and are they willing to pay for it? So.
Well, your culture is you are a product-centric company.
Absolutely.
That is what you're about. And I think if you stick with that, I think that you're going to wind up being very, very successful. We hear these days you got to be all things, great at customer service and great at whatever. And, you have hired the few people that I talk to are excellent. You're excellent. I haven't met Kevin. I'm sure he's excellent. You guys have built an excellent product, and I really, as a user, appreciate the updates. And you haven't asked me for the money, but I realized I did an update, and I'm going to have to sign up for the $10 a month plan.
That's
in order to get
we're
it
launching
going.
that soon, Charlie. Don't worry, you'll be able to put down your credit card soon enough.
All right, that sounds great. Well, let me.
Thank you so much for your
I'll
support.
let you go. This has been excellent. I'll just do a little summary close, and you could listen in on it if you'd like, and we'll go from there. And I'll just say goodbye to you. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me and Dennis Shue on the Charlie Paparelli Show. This has been excellent, and I do recommend Mem.ai. It is beyond note-taking. He has moved into really good search, and he is just on the edge of this great breakthrough of discovery search, which is going to make it a knowledge base and make it so quick. But the thing that you got to know, it's so quick and easy to put a thought down in Mem like nothing else you've ever worked with. Dennis is going to be successful, and along with his partner, Kevin. So congratulations to Mem. Thanks for joining us. Please sign up at paparelli.com. I appreciate you being with us. Bye-bye.